Buenas noches. I'm Cindy Segato Jones. I'm the superintendent of Glendale Elementary School District. And thank you for coming out this evening. We want to share with you a presentation regarding the possible school closures and repurposing of our schools. I'm going to do some introductions. What we'll do is go through the introductions. We'll begin the presentation. And then we will take time to answer questions. You should have your cards with your questions that you have. We also have a FAQ for you. So if there's questions that haven't been asked, we're happy to answer those. And then after the presentation, if you have additional questions, we're happy to answer those as well. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and do the introductions. To me, to my left, is our board president, Brenda Bartell. Our other board members are down in Marianne Wilson, board member. Monica Pimentel, board member. To my left is Dr. Jerry Peterson Provida, Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services. To my right, Mr. Mike Flanagan, and he is our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Auxiliary Services. To his right is Dr. Melissa Lee. He is our Assistant Superintendent for Behavior and Student Services. And to his right is Ms. Debbie Valadez. She's Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. And with that, we'll go ahead and begin the presentation. Todos escuchan bien en español.
Good evening, buenas tardes. We're going to go through this presentation. I'm going to be mindful that I'm going to get, so I'll try to slow down a bit. The presentation tonight is really to give you an idea of the rationale and some of the information that we've used to make a proposal to the governing board. In addition to that, it's also an opportunity for us to address some misconceptions about some of the things that have been said. And so we'll go through those. The strategic goal is that we will ensure financial solvency by providing the community a multi-year process of school closures, reorganizing boundaries, and repurposing schools by June of 2021. The proposals that you're aware of, these conversations started in February of 2019. And perhaps one of the important pieces is that this information was being discussed pre-pandemic. We had several meetings on this issue. You can see the dates. And these were study sessions, perhaps in some cases executive sessions related to these topics. In addition to those meeting dates, anytime that we had a budget update or an annual financial report presentation, we talked about enrollment and the decline in enrollment. Our hope tonight is to share with you, perhaps in a little more detail, on a one-on-one basis, one-on-one level, of the rationale for phase 1 and for phase 2. And it's to optimize efficiencies by conducting cost analysis to pursue school closures, boundary changes, and or repurposing. But some of the factors that we took into consideration was the declining enrollment, and we're going to talk a little bit in more detail in the next couple of slides. The population density within a specific area, the life of the facility, program changes, and any statutory requirements. What we hope that you take away from tonight to clear some confusion that this proposal is because of the pandemic. And I'm going to continue to reiterate that the proposal and the information that we were seeing was pre-pandemic information. So the enrollment decline was already in our forecast, and we saw that in December of 2016. There is a state agency, the Arizona School Facilities Board. Again, they're a state agency. They have some oversight responsibility over school buildings. But what they do on an annual basis, in a very similar fashion as Glendale, they have a demographer that looks at the demographics of a particular, in our case, the state, the district, but in their case, the state. And it was in their June 15th of 2017, in one of their reports, that they identified our district as being one of the top 10 districts that were losing enrollment. And then in 18, 19, and in the 20 report, they reflected our district that we were still losing students. So again, in the top 10 of declining enrollment in the entire state. And then these are independent state agencies that look at enrollment by district for the entire state. There's another state agency, the Auditor General's Office. Every March 1st, they publish what's called the Classroom Dollars Report. And in 2017, the way that they used to describe our district's decrease, the term that they used was a moderate decrease. In 2018, the term that they used at that time was a large decrease. In 2019, the term was just decrease. And this March 1st, they used the term 16% decrease. There's a link, kind of in that yellowish looking color. You can do two things. One, you can write it down. You can see that you can use your phone. You can get this presentation, download it to your phone, so that everything that you're seeing tonight, you have easy access to. But in that link, and if you search for Glendale Elementary, you'll find and you'll see that they indicate that for the last 4 years, the district has actually decreased about 32%. I would encourage you, don't take my word for it. Don't take our word for it. I would encourage you to go to that link and so that you can see that. It's an independent state agency report that identifies their concern that we're declining enrollment. Because when you decline enrollment, it's one indicator of being potentially in financial stress. This slide is enrollment. And you're going to hear me talk about ADM, or average daily membership. It's a technical term that we use on a regular basis, on a daily basis. But I want to just give you an idea of the difference between enrollment and ADM. And a kindergarten class is perhaps the easiest and best example of how I try to explain the difference. For easy math, we're going to use, let's say that we have 20 students in a kindergarten class. You're visiting your child's class and you see 20 students. When I pull the report from the state, I only see 10. Because in 2010, the state of Arizona, the legislature cut funding for kindergartners by half. And that was because of the recession and the financial impact that had on the state as a whole. So they were looking at ways to reduce their costs. And so when we see 20 in a classroom, in reality, we're only getting paid for 10. That information is helpful as we get to this presentation because you'll see a difference. And so for this purpose, this is where you're going to see enrollment, the actual number of kids in the building, or in this case, our district. You can see what the enrollment was in 95, 96, up until this year, 2021. But what was interesting, so we hired a demographer to do a demographic study. And what they identified in their study was that they project that over the next 10 years that we're going to continue to lose enrollment. One significant or contributing factor is that we have low birth rates. And we started to see that when the 2008-2009 recession occurred. Historically, when there's a recession, birth rates historically decrease. We're feeling the impact of that recession now. And one of the things that our demographer said was, and I think it was in November or December, he said, your enrollment today is lower than when it was in the 95-96 school year. And he said at that time we had 12 schools. That was a real eye-opener. I know for me, for the rest of the team, and we shared that with the governing board. I guess, that was just a shocking piece of information that in 95-96 we had more students than we do today, but we had 12 schools. The other piece that he identified in his report, or that they identified in the report, was competition with other educational institutions was another reason for declining enrollment. And then one of the things that you've heard the superintendent, you might have heard me say this in board meetings or in other communications, is that the third factor that we believe that we're losing enrollment also is affordable housing. And so those are three contributing factors on the decrease in enrollment. So birth rate, which is huge, because that impact occurs over time. The question is, what will COVID-19 have, not only here, but in the state, in the country, will birth rates be reduced because of COVID-19? I think that's a question that, with time will be answered. The information from 2001 to 2020-21 is information that we specifically get from the Department of Education. That report is called the ADMS 46-1. And you can just see what that ADM, again, this is what we get funded on, which is a little bit different than the number of kids we physically see in classrooms. You can see that it was in that 2016, 2017 that we started to see that decrease. In the report, that demographic study, it identified pre-pandemic that we were going to decrease by 3%. So last year, we had 10,813 students. And what we did to project or anticipate that reduction in students, we reduced it by 3%. So we built the budget on 10,500. But then COVID-19 hit, we saw a bigger decrease. 2 measuring times in the school year, the 40th day, which is I think October, and then the 100th day, which is in January, which the state uses to kind of calculate the school district payments for the year. It was 8,339. So you can imagine that if we're expecting 10,500 students, we're getting paid for 10,500 students. But then actually receive payments for 8,339, you can see that there's a loss of revenue. Pretty significant loss of revenue. What I wanted to show you tonight, what we wanted to show you tonight specifically was 22 through 29 is what the demographic study, the declines that we projected over time, we applied that in future years pre-pandemic. And so you can see what we projected. And so the reason that this slide is important is because we were noticing that enrollment was going to be an issue. It was going to be a challenge. When enrollment decreases, you lose funding. And that's how we really came to a proposal of we need to downsize so that we have enough revenue to meet those expenses. Otherwise, you have more expenses than you have revenue, and that becomes problematic. The information that you're seeing here is that projection over the next 9 years, but by school. The darker the blue, the greater the decline. So if you look at Imes, in 2013-2014 school year, we had 542 kids. But in 9 years from now, 8 years from now, the projection is 388. A school cannot be sustained when you have that low enrollment at 388. And I would encourage you, again, this information is available on our website. At the end, you can click on your camera, you can get the presentation downloaded directly to your phone. I would encourage you to really look at this information in particular, because it gives you an idea by school, and really the logic and rationale behind those recommendations. As a district, in 2013-2014, we had about 13,573 students. It's projected pre-pandemic to be 9,542 by the 28-29 school year. When we talked about the birth rates and what that does, there's a domino effect on what that does to grade levels over time. Part of the reason that there's a proposal to combine K3, 4-8, and K8 is also to address this issue, but also, and we'll talk about it further in the presentation, about the academic benefit of having a K8 setting. You can see where pre-pandemic, where those numbers K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8 were projected to be over the next 8 or 9 years. And that's the information that we're using for the basis of the proposal. For the third reason that we believe that we're seeing an increase in enrollment is affordable housing. I believe it was February 25th, thank you. The Glendale Star had an article that affordable housing, in order to have affordable housing, you have to go far west or down south. And I think they talk about like Casa Grande. So the timing of that is just coincidental. But it also brings the issue to light, because this is something that we've been saying for a while. Is affordable housing weakness is also problematic. This information is a very simplified financial breakdown of the challenges that we're facing this year. We built the budget with the assumption that we would have 10,500 kids. We're getting 8,339. That means that the difference is 2,161 students. From a percentage perspective, that's almost 21% decrease. From an actual dollar value, we estimate that about 14.3 million, or about 23% reduction. Just imagine, whatever your monthly bills are today, just think about it for a minute, and you lose 23% of your take-home pay. The question is, what do you do? That same question we have to answer from a school district perspective. It's truly no different. What we also wanted to address and highlight the district, as well as other districts in Arizona and frankly throughout the country, there are federal dollars that are being made available to school districts. The ESSER fund, this row here, we receive approximately about $4.6 million in federal dollars. The 1.9 of that 4.6, we're using it to offset this deficit. The difference was used for those things that we needed to purchase to address distance learning and geo-learning. Some of those things included hotspots. We made available to our families throughout the district. Russell, did we buy 3,000? 3,000. I believe we bought 3,000 hotspots to make them available for our families. Software, equipment. How many of your kids have Chromebooks? Chromebooks were used, we purchased additional Chromebooks so that we can implement the distance learning and or the geos. And other monies were used for preparation for PPE. This row here, we received about $4,025,000. We would be using about $3.3 million to offset this deficit. The difference, $750,000 or so, we were using to address some insurance-related issues, liability issues. And then lastly, this row here. In December, the federal government made additional money available to not only our school district, but other school districts in Arizona and the country. And our allocation from that fund is about roughly $19.8 million. We would be using almost $9.1 million to address this year's deficit. What's left over, or what we get at, we would be using it next year to address next year's deficit. So a lot of questions has come up. Well, aren't you getting federal dollars? Yes, we are. And this is how we're using a portion of that to address the deficit. We believe that the information that you're receiving, that you should verify that. This report is a report put together by the Department of Education. And I'm just kind of pointing to it here. They have it at $14 million, decided $14 million of deficit. We have it about 14.3, so we're within $200,000 to $300,000. I would encourage you to do the research. Look at the Department of Education's website. The report is really 3 pages long. This is truly just a snapshot to give you an idea. And hopefully encourage you to verify the information that we're telling you here tonight. This is in Spanish. So the same report, Enrique translated it so that you can see it in Spanish. It's the same report. Based on the information that we know today, for next year, we project a deficit of about $18.1 million. Remember, there's money left over from that $19.8 million. We would be using that to offset this deficit that you see here. What we've said at governing board meetings, what we've said at the previous presentations at the other schools is, as we get closer to the end of the school year, we'll know what that final deficit is. The legislature is still in session. If and when they increase funding for public schools, we will recalculate the information and know where we are as we get closer to June 30th. One of the other things that we wanted to address was misconceptions. We've heard that the district received voter approval for bonds, $35 million in 2018, and that's true. We appreciate your support in that. What the misconception that is out there is that that money can be used to offset those deficits that we showed you. The law does not allow us to use those funds to address our operating costs. The bond, $35 million in 2018, by law, needs to be used for capital-related improvements, capital needs. Whether that's new construction, or innovation, equipment such as HVAC, AC units, boilers, heaters, those things that are typically in a building and or require renovations. But what we wanted to show you was what our need is over the next 20 years, because we look at things over the next 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. So there's a breakdown. We realize that the information is small, but we wanted to highlight, truly in a summarized fashion, what that projection is. How many of you are aware, show of hands, that the district is a leading plaintiff in a capital lawsuit against the state? Show of hands. I believe it was in May of 2016, Glen Elementary, 3 other school districts, a couple of other organizations, and a taxpayer are suing the state because of lack of capital funding to public education. It's a lawsuit. There's depositions. At some point, we'll testify, and we're going to talk about, and a judge is going to rule on that, because there's a old case in the late 90s and early 2000s. This very issue that we're litigating today was litigated 20 plus years ago. And so the district is advocating on behalf of not only our kids here in Glendale, but also the entire state, because there is a lack of funding when it comes to capital items. The recommendations to the governing board have been broken up in 2 parts, or 2 phases. In that first phase, the proposed closures of Imes and Sign, Imes students are reassigned to Perkins, Landmark, and Smith. Sign students would be reassigned to Perkins and Horizon. With that, we're also making boundary changes. And you can see there, I won't read them all back, so I'll give you time to look at those. In phase 2, the proposal is to close Coyote Ridge, Desert Garden, and Bicentennial North. Coyote Ridge students are reassigned to Discovery. Coyote Ridge is repurposed. We're going to talk a little bit about that, what that means a little bit later. Desert Garden students are reassigned to calendar events, and that reconfiguration changes to a K-8 model. Again, birth rates, and then there's some academic reasons on why we believe that is prudent. Desert Garden would be repurposed. North students are reassigned to South events. Bicentennial South is reconfigured also to a K-8 model. Part of the reason that you see this in 2 phases, specifically here, is we need time to allow for those K-3 schools, where that were K-3 schools, we need to reconfigure them so they can accommodate the K-8 setting. In phase 2, you can see just some of the boundary changes that would also occur. This is the current boundaries or the current grids. This is what we're proposing. If you see, one of our goals is that if you live east of Grand, we want the student to remain east of Grand. And if you live west of Grand, remaining west of Grand. This visual is trying to accomplish the same thing, but the visuals are slightly different. You can just kind of see that phase 1 and phase 2. One of the concerns that we've heard is by downsizing, will those schools be overcrowded? The column on the left-hand side is the capacity for that school or those schools. The second column is what that enrollment would look like in phase 1 as we transition. And then you can see what that means in phase 2 as well. What we wanted to do in this analysis is we took We left the geo kids as if they were going to a brick and mortar school so that we could have a good understanding of what it would be from a student to capacity. So we believe this is a conservative analysis. And you can see that in no example, in most cases, there is no capacity issues. If there were a capacity issue, we would address it. The next question or next concern becomes is, what does that mean for my students' class size? We've heard, does that mean, or it would imply, that now my students' class goes from 20 to 40, or whatever the case may be. We wanted to make sure that parents understood this particular slide. This is for this year, it's an average by district, by grade level. You can see, you can pick third grade. I'm going to go with third grade. It's in the center, it's in the top, it's in the middle. And what you're going to see, and what this reflects, is that we have 16 classrooms that have 14 through 19, between 14 and 19 students. And you can just look at whatever grade level, you can see whatever class size. But what we want you to take away from this is that 96% of our class sizes are either at or below the standard. And if you take last year, people say, well, it's the pandemic, naturally those are going to be lower. But if you take last year's, we're about 80%. So 80% of our class sizes were either at or below the standard. And we believe that's an important piece of information. There's a lot of misconception about it. The standard is the standard. I can say that every Tuesday morning, HR, the superintendent for HR brings enrollment information by grade level, and we look at it and we see what those class sizes are, and if it's necessary, we make those necessary adjustments. Preschool facility in the 22-23 school year. Currently, tuition-based preschool occurs throughout the district, but a centralized location will allow for efficiencies in physical and staff resources. We would have wraparound services, so one location for district preschool, partnerships with Head Start, pre-K workshops, child find screenings, first things first, classes for parents and children, preschool kindergarten transition meetings occur in a centralized location, and a centralized location for a district-wide kindergarten registration. The preschool facility and the rationale, we've identified in our proposal that be Desert Garden. Desert Garden, its location, the space, the campus layout, the organization of the school itself, and then the physical aspects of that campus. It was built to be an accommodating K-3, so naturally preschool would just make sense there. I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
We're going to talk now about the systems of care, but I do want to apologize. We don't need to be rude. As you saw some of us leaving, we're trying to stay at the capacity so we can get all the families in. So some of our staff stepped outside so that we have room for our families. So thank you for understanding that. When we talk about GST system of care center framework, it's been very important to us that we look at what are some of the services we can provide our community as far as behavioral health services, for some of our at-risk for mental health or other challenges that families may have. And we want to be able to provide some of these at one site in one location. We currently do work with outside agencies to provide counseling services with that are satellite at some of our other campuses. But in our mind, we want to be able to be partnered with other organizations to expand and even look at possibility of medical clinics as well for our community. So that's where we are on this particular phase.
Sure.
So Really, it's a continuum of support services for students and families anywhere across the district. There would be health program staff by health specialists to screen and provide early intervention for our students and helping the students and families, and they connect families with schools and communities and other resources to do that. With that, the recommendation for this facility proposed for repurposing is Coyote Ridge. Coyote Ridge is located, it's the only school in our district that's located on a main thoroughfare. So it makes sense to put it on at that facility. It's a large enough facility. It sits on Bethany Home Road. It has easy access for public transportation, and then we would be able to house all those services there. So that's why we chose that facility. The location, the space, of it, the campus layout, and easy access. Also, it's one of the only schools within our district that is not nestled within a neighborhood. Sometimes we see when we're nestled within a neighborhood, our other sister schools feel that it is not welcoming to them because it's not within their own neighborhood. And because, again, this is on a main thoroughfare, this would have the easy access for anybody that they would feel welcome there. With that, this is, if you want to hold your thumbs up to this, you can get the entire presentation, and we also have handouts for you to do that as well. With that, that ends the presentation, but what we're going to do is take time to answer the questions that you have. We do really understand that when you're looking at closing schools or repurposing closed schools, it's very emotional. We know we all have attachments to our schools, and we understand that. As leadership, it's our responsibility also not only to provide us quality education for your children, but also we have to do that by maintaining financial solvency. So that's what brings us to these proposals based by our governing board made decisions on. What we're going to do is take time to answer questions. You would have your questions on your cards. If you have them or you have additional questions now, please put them on the cards, take them over to the table. If you'll give us just a couple minutes to sort through the cards, we'll answer those questions. We'll do it in both languages or 3 languages that we have this evening. And then if it's a duplicate question, we'll say it's a duplicate question, but we won't answer it twice, we'll just answer it once. And then if it's already been answered, then we obviously won't answer that one again, so that everybody gets their questions answered. Okay? So if you just give us a minute, let us do that. And if we need to pull additional staff back in to answer questions, you might see one of us step out and we'll answer questions that way. All right? Thank you.
Voy a repasar las preguntas porque hay preguntas que se repiten. Vamos a tener un minutito. Pongan las manos, ¿ok? Muchas gracias. Les agradecemos su paciencia. Couple questions, those are not questions. Voy a pasar la primera en español y luego la en inglés. Will the children be able to finish school here this school year?
Yes, for the remainder of the school year, as we return on March 22nd, children will finish the school year.
Si los niños van a poder terminar el ciclo escolar aquí, y si la junta directiva toma la decisión de cerrar la escuela, entonces esto es para el próximo ciclo escolar. Is it our fault, or the parents' fault, or the school's fault that Imes is being closed?
It's not the parents' fault.
No, it's culpa de los padres.
It's not the parents' fault. The school is closing, as you saw through the presentation, again, because of declining enrollment. It's about
Entonces, lo que estamos viendo simplemente es la reducción de la matrícula a través de los años. No es suficiente.
The issue of who's at fault, we don't believe that there's anyone at fault. At some point,
A nadie que culpar por esto.
and these things happen in cycles over time.
Y esto suele suceder en ciclos.
You know, there are communities, the news article that we had, that you have to go far west or far south to find affordable housing. When these communities are formed, there's growth. At some point, over 20 or 30 years, whatever the case may be, there might be, growth no longer exists. And so I don't know that there's anyone to blame per se, except the enrollment in our district, within our district boundaries, cannot support the number of schools that we have. And so the prudent thing to do is to downsize so that we have enough money
El número
to fund our
estudiantes
expenses.
que existen actualmente no apoya el número de escuelas que tenemos. Y cuando hay desarrollo o fraccionamientos nuevos, realmente en el área del distrito no existe, se están construyendo mucho más al oeste de nosotros. Y esto viene en ciclos. Algún día quizás crecen esos desarrollos aquí al área, pero no continúan. ¿Cuál es la mejor opción que podemos tomar para apoyarlos? What's the best option that we have to continue to support the school students?
I didn't hear that question.
What is the best option that we can take as parents to support the school? The school. What's the best option? Yeah, what's the best option that we
What
can
is the
take?
best option?
Yeah.
I think that the best option for the school is really, what is the best financial solvency of the district, is that we have to downsize to do that. I think there's concerns, and I know the other questions I read through those, is that your students have been here for many years, some are just starting, and it's difficult to change school, very difficult. Please remember that when you change schools, some of your siblings will be together, and some of your classmates will be together based on your boundaries. What we would propose doing, should this be the direction that we move, is that we would hold transition meetings so that you would be able, and your children would be able to see new facilities, meet new staff members, and that they would know exactly where they were going ahead of time, and be able to begin to build those relationships at a new location.
Si se toma la decisión de cerrar la escuela, vamos a tomar reuniones de transición con los estudiantes para que los estudiantes tengan la oportunidad de conocer la nueva escuela. No nomás llegar el día y empezar con la escuela. Pues hay una transición donde no llegue de golpe. Si llegan a cerrar la escuela, ustedes nos digan a dónde el hijo o hija se va a proveer autobús.
There's a link on our website under this topic. We would encourage you to go.
Hay un enlace donde aparece el nombre que indica los límites residenciales.
But we also have staff outside that can help you answer that question based on the proposal. We have IT staff, just if you have a question on where your child might be going,
Sí,
to phase 1 or phase 2, they will be able to help you with that as
Aquí la
well.
escuela o el distrito, exactamente la escuela.
And as far as the transportation question is, Anyone who meets the eligibility for the capitation, we will transfer.
Si cualquier estudiante que sea elegible, que corresponda a la transformación de la distancia, se las vamos a poder. This is some questions we can read.
Do you think having other schools pile up a lot of students is going to make a difference? It's not going, here's what we need to understand when you look at that. We have standard class sizes. So example, if a standard class size is 25, when you go into the new school, my students moving to the other school, the standard of 25 is the same. So we're not taking Imes students and putting them at another school with the same number of students. The standard is the same.
Como comentamos en esta diapositiva en la presentación, el número de estudiantes no va a aumentar en las escuelas. Tenemos un estándar, tenemos una norma que dice cuál es el máximo de cada uno de los salones. Y eso que, como vemos aquí, realmente hay unos pocos salones que exceden el estándar, pero realmente en los últimos años no ha sucedido eso.
What will happen to our kids if they miss the bus before school? I can't drive them. We have responsibilities, right? So we have responsibilities as parents to make sure our kids are on buses. If we're delayed or anything, we will make sure that we get your children transported. This is very, I think that's standard what we try to do.
La pregunta es, ¿qué sucedería si el estudiante no pudiera ir a la escuela por el transporte? ¿Sería?
Yeah, the superintendent mentioned, we've been in a situation for whatever reason, and sometimes our buses get, wrong ran and we get delayed because of the train. If that becomes an issue on our end, we usually send a backup bus to pick up the students, and we notify the parents when we're in this situation, when it's on our end.
Actualmente, si un autobús se dilata, autobús se entrega la avenida Gray, por lo general nosotros notificamos a la escuela, pasado, etcétera. Entonces, si ese autobús iba a tener estudiantes, rumbo a tener estudiantes, cuando se notifica, entonces mandan una estudiante, un autobús adicional a recoger sus estudiantes.
Why are you making the decision during a pandemic? We, unfortunately, the pandemic is occurring now, but we began this process over 2 years ago, and this is the timeline which we have been on. It's not something that we decided to do during the pandemic. It just happens. This is the timeline. We began this 2 years ago, as you saw. We had conversations beginning then about we knew looking at enrollment, always wishing that we would see an increase in enrollment. We haven't. We know in order to be able to operate next year and not face into receivership, the decisions have to be made.
Sí, la cronología que tenemos está pensando en la propuesta. Está sucediendo mucho más antes de la pandemia. Entonces, una de las cosas que no queremos nosotros es que vayamos a perder el control del distrito con el Estado por mala administración de fondos. Y eso que
And I'm going to elaborate on what the superintendent mentioned about receivership, and that's something that, in all the presentations, if not all, most of them, we address it, and so I want to take the time to address receivership and what that means.
Entonces, el señor Vargas quiere hacer es aclarar, quiere decir qué es perder control de un distrito al Estado.
The law says that if the school district grossly mismanages its finances, that it will be put into receivership, which means that someone that is not the governing board, that is not the current administration, gets to make unilateral decisions in order to have balanced budget and get back into solvency again.
Sí, eso quiere decir que el Estado podría asignar a tomar control de todo relacionado con el distrito. Todas las decisiones, la junta directiva, los miembros de la junta directiva, los superintendentes podrían decir nada en absoluto de cómo manejar el distrito. Y no queremos que eso llegue porque llegamos a una forma muy imprudente de manejar los fondos.
Next one is, what happens to all the teachers? What if there is an increase, will Imes reopen?
Eso sucedería con los maestros. Si
Typically, every year we have a turnover of, it ranges, average of over 130, 40, 150, depends, teachers a year. So teachers will be placed at other sites. We don't, at this time, contracts haven't been issued out, but when we issue those, but they've been issued, once they return, we'll know exactly. But teachers at this point will be placed at other sites. And we don't anticipate losing teachers in that sense, because we always have a higher turnover.
Sí, no anticipamos perder maestros cada año por atención de maestros que renuncian, se mudan, se van, se retiran. Por lo general contratamos entre 140 a 150 maestros. Dado lo que está sucediendo, si esas compras se llevan a tomar, eso quiere decir que no contrataríamos porque hay maestros pendientes aquí. Entonces, esos maestros serían asignados a las plazas que estén disponibles en otras escuelas. ¿Qué podemos hacer para que esto no suceda? ¿Qué podemos hacer para por nuestros hijos que están tristes? What can we do for this not to happen, and what can we do to help our kids who are very sad?
So with that, as I mentioned earlier, we will do transition plans so that you will be able to meet new staff and visit the facilities. And so we begin those transition meetings.
I'm going to read this question. What happens to all the teachers? Superintendent addressed that. What? I have a two-part question. What if there's an increase while time's open? That's a question that that we received at every school. You know, if there's an increase, will that particular school open? And so what I wanted to do is just kind of show you. I want to show you.
La pregunta fue, ¿qué sucedería si hoy, al final del ciclo escolar, hay un aumento de estudiantes?
We would have to grow to almost 13,000 students.
Tendríamos que crecer aproximadamente a 13,000 estudiantes para ya no estar en interés.
From where we are
Donde
today,
estamos actualmente.
but not just from a deficit, but being able to maintain
Y mantener ese
schools.
número de estudiantes.
And that has to be maintained for the next 10 years.
Debe mantener ese número por los próximos 10 años.
And it would really have to grow between now and like tonight, right? In other words, it has to happen overnight for that to occur.
Suceder pues una cosa inmediata para que
Let me read this one. We came up first. Once you shut down our school, what do you intend to do to attract students back to DSP?
cuando cierren la escuela, ¿qué tendrá que hacer con sus estudiantes?
We have been working on a campaign to increase student enrollment all along. Right when we saw the decrease in enrollment, we began a campaign, a marketing campaign, where and did rebranding of the district. We continue to do that. We run advertisements on the radio, we do it in Glendale Star, so we continue to do that. That's been part of the campaign process all
Una de las
along.
cosas que hemos hecho, estamos promoviendo la escuela, no solamente la escuela, el distrito, a través de los diferentes métodos de comunicación, medios de comunicación, en la radio, en los periódicos, por ejemplo, Glendale Star, tratamos de promover las promociones de lo que hacemos en las escuelas, los programas educacionales, etc.
In addition to that, we develop specialty schools to attract. We have dual language schools, we have STEAM schools as well. We have an accelerated academy school. So those are the specialty schools that we've established to try to attract our students as well. And again, one thing that attracts students is strong academic programs. And we have seen an increase in academics performance of our students over the last several years, and that is one thing that attracts our families as well. So we
Una de las cosas que atraen a los estudiantes fuera del área es tener un programa fuerte académico. Tenemos escuelas especializadas, tenemos varios programas, lo que llamamos STEAM en inglés, también ciencias, matemáticas, ingeniería, las artes. donde se especializan en eso. Entonces, este tipo lo hemos hecho. En los últimos años hemos visto un crecimiento en el rendimiento académico de los estudiantes. Vamos a continuar haciendo eso.
How do you plan to entice parents to stay in GSD? I think I've addressed that with some of the students, to stay with the students based on our the specialty schools and academics. But one thing also we're hoping to do with this systems of care is to bring in resources for families, so it's a complete wraparound service at the location.
Sí, entonces, como acaba de mencionar la superintendente, no solamente tenemos programas para los estudiantes, pero eso también atrae a los padres a quedarse, y por ejemplo, en el centro que hablamos de cuidado, donde vamos a básicamente volver a todo en un solo lugar para darle, proveer estos servicios a los padres lo que necesitan.
For example, we currently have, and we'll expand on parenting classes as well for our families, classes in English and Spanish, which we do to expand on, and GPP offerings as well.
Sí, clases para los padres en diferentes áreas, aprendizaje en inglés, nutrición, mejoramiento de destrezas por padre, todo eso lo estamos ofreciendo en diferentes partes.
Why are teachers not at this meeting? When we conduct the meetings, community meetings for possible rebounding and school closures, it's specific that we need to include the community. If teachers live within that community, then they attend those meetings often as well. When we go into the next steps of that, our teachers have been informed about school closures through our meetings, through governing board meetings. We shared those through weekly updates. Once if decisions are made to close or repurpose schools, then staff meetings would occur so that they would understand what happens in those situations, such as relocation of, for example, one of the schools is closed and I'm one of those teachers at a school that's closed, where am I placed? Those conversations and meetings don't take place until a decision has been made.
La pregunta fue por qué los maestros no están presentes en estas reuniones. Y la presentación que tenemos ahorita es básicamente para los presidentes de las áreas afectadas. Ahora, si el maestro, la maestra, cualquier persona del plantel vive dentro de esa área, con mucho gusto pueden asistir. Pero para los maestros se van a ser afectados quizás por estos seres. Entonces, para ellos, les hemos comunicado a través de las juntas, las reuniones en la sala de la junta directiva, a través de varios otros métodos de información. Y los maestros que vayan a ser afectados, tenemos que tener una junta directamente con ellos. Si hubieran tantos estudiantes a una escuela, ¿creen que va a ser seguro para nuestros hijos con esto de la pandemia? Sending other students to other schools, as many kids as we're sending. Will it be safe for them and as we continue to deal with the pandemic?
Again, when we looked at those numbers, we shared the number of students at the site does not increase in the classroom size. We go at the classroom standard. As far, I think the questions regarding the return of the pandemic, we have mitigation plans in place. We shared those, and those are on the website, so we were prepared for that. As you know, the executive order by the governor requires us to be back in school on Wednesday.
Y vamos a seguir las mitigaciones que hemos puesto en el lugar, a ver cómo las directrices del condado y del estado, pero en realidad nosotros seguimos lo que se nos da por las agencias de salud para poder seguir y asegurarnos que los estudiantes estén seguros de este trabajo. Muchas de las preguntas que están aquí son muy parecidas a las que hice.
Thank you so much for coming out. We appreciate that. We know it's very emotional when we have to look at household closing and purchasing the schools. We understand the emotions that brings to families and within the community. As we said,
es muy difícil, muy complicado. Les damos las gracias. Sé que es una difícil decisión para todos.
What we will always do is always keep the instructional program and task for our students who will still receive high quality education. We will make sure that if this is the direction that we proceed, that we will have those community meetings so that we can transition back into the new location.
Entonces, nosotros vamos a mantener los programas de alta calidad docentes educativos y mantener esto no va a cambiar. Vamos a seguir tratando de dar la mejor educación y mejor calidad para todos. Les damos las gracias a todos. Las personas que decimos audífonos, si pueden dejar una parte, les damos las gracias. Una pregunta.
Entonces ya es cierre.
No, simplemente es una propuesta. Como es propuesta, la ley indica que la decisión va a ser de la Junta. Question was, has the decision been made? The decision being made.
Yes, the governing board meeting is on Thursday, so at that time, there's another public hearing, and then it's on the agenda for the governing board.
La Junta Directiva tiene una reunión este próximo jueves y es donde van a tomar la decisión. Esas son propuestas, pero tenemos que dejar saber a la comunidad. Si puede dejar las audífonos y las ventas, nosotros.
And Enrique said they know it's at district office.
Sí, es en la oficina del distrito, en la sala de la distrito.